everyone. Welcome to Sam's Summaries. This episode is a deep dive discussion into Sam Fury's summary of Chapter 14 from the book Models by Mark Manson. It has been created with the help of AI. The chapter is titled Physicality and Sex. You can read the original post at samfury.com.
Ever get that feeling like dating advice is kind of messing with you?
Yeah.
Like 1 minute it's all be open, be vulnerable, and the next it's all be the alpha, take charge.
Right.
Well, today we're going deep on a source that is definitely on that bolder, take charge side. We're going to see what it gets right, what it gets wrong, and what you can actually use.
Yeah, this source, it doesn't hold back. It's got some strong opinions, especially about, well, physicality and sex. So we're going to break it all down, look at it critically, and see if there are any nuggets of wisdom in there, any insights we can pull out.
All right, so the source material for this deep dive, it's Chapter 14 of Mark Manson's Models. And let me tell you, he jumps right in with some pretty bold claims.
Yeah.
Yeah, for example, he's suggesting there's almost like these hidden formulas for attraction, especially when it comes to how men should approach women.
Okay.
He really emphasizes that women, supposedly, they desire men to be, super assertive and dominant. So right off the bat, I'm curious, are these like universal truths about attraction or just one dude's perspective?
What I find interesting right away is how much the source emphasizes physical touch. And not just like later on in dating, but like from the very first interaction. Handshakes, hugs, even like a light touch on the elbow while you're talking to emphasize a point.
So almost like he's giving a step-by-step playbook.
Yeah.
Like touch the elbow, initiate games, escalate physical contact. He even uses the phrase err on the side of escalation, basically saying men should push boundaries, even if there's a little resistance. Doesn't that seem kind of risky in today's dating world?
Yeah, it definitely can be. I mean, I agree that physical touch, when it's appropriate, it can be powerful. It can build a connection, but it has to be like calibrated to the situation and the individual.
Right.
We can't forget about consent. Reading signals, both positive and negative, is key. So enthusiasm, yeah, that's great. But discomfort, you never ignore that.
This source, it lays out what it calls signal stages, and it's presented almost like a roadmap. It's guiding men from the initial pre-approach all the way to escalating to physical intimacy.
Interesting.
And the whole idea is that men should be constantly looking for these very specific cues from women to know when it's okay to move to that next level.
Okay.
So I got to ask, do you buy into that?
I think it's definitely helpful to be aware of some signals, but the problem with this type of advice, it often leads to like these rigid interpretations and assumptions.
I see.
Because everyone expresses themselves differently, and those expressions can vary, based on cultural norms or just personal preferences.
Right.
Open communication is always the best way. If you're unsure, just ask. Checking in with your partner throughout the interaction, that can make all the difference.
So to give some concrete examples here, this source specifically points to things like prolonged eye contact, or playing with hair, or standing in close proximity, even a woman isolating herself with a man. Like those are surefire signs of romantic interest. And I'm sure, a lot of our listeners have experienced some of these. But the question is, are these always indicative of attraction? Or could they be easily misinterpreted?
Yeah, that's where things get a bit more complex. And that's where this source, it starts to show its limitations. Context is everything. A smile doesn't always mean someone is romantically interested.
Right.
Someone standing close might just be bad at personal space.
Yeah.
We have to be careful about applying these like blanket interpretations to body language, because reality is much more nuanced than that.
Okay, so we've talked about those initial interactions, but this source, it also gets into like physical intimacy, in the bedroom. And this is where the language, it gets pretty strong. He really advocates for male dominance. He's using terms like primal, talk dirty, and get physical. So should this type of language, should that be taken as a healthy approach to intimacy? Or is there more to unpack here?
Well, it's important to acknowledge that, power dynamics in sexual relationships can be incredibly complex. There are definitely individuals and couples who genuinely enjoy and thrive in dominant submissive roles.
Right.
But it's crucial that those roles are always explicitly negotiated.
Yeah.
And consensual, never assumed. This is where I find this source, potentially problematic. It seems to promote kind of a very narrow, one-size-fits-all approach to sexuality that could be misleading or even harmful to some.
And that brings us to another critical point here, consent. This source, it glosses over the importance of clear and enthusiastic consent, almost implying that it's not a crucial element of intimacy. It even advises men not to ask and claims she'll tell you if you're going too far.
Right.
I gotta say that's pretty alarming advice, especially today when we're really emphasizing the importance of consent in, well, all interactions.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a very outdated and potentially harmful approach to intimacy.
Yeah.
Explicit, ongoing consent is absolutely fundamental to any healthy sexual encounter. Assuming that someone will always voice their discomfort, it's not only irresponsible, but it can create dangerous situations where boundaries are crossed and someone's agency is disregarded.
You know, I'm noticing a theme here in this source.
Mm.
It's this assumption that men and women, they experience and communicate desire in fundamentally different ways.
Mm.
It seems to put the onus on men to drive the interaction forward, to be the initiators, and to correctly interpret those so-called signals we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But is that really how attraction works? Is it always so black and white?
Well, there may be some general patterns in how men and women express themselves, but it's so important to remember we're talking about individuals, each with their unique communication styles and preferences.
Yeah.
Reducing attraction to this set of rigid rules or assuming that one gender always has to take the lead, I think that ignores the complexity and the beauty of human connection.
What about this idea of not asking for consent? The source frames it almost like a strategy for appearing more masculine and attractive. But wouldn't that approach lead to, more awkwardness, misunderstandings, potentially even unsafe situations?
Absolutely. Consent isn't just about a single yes or no. It's an ongoing conversation. It's a continuous process of checking in with your partner, ensuring mutual understanding, and respecting each other's boundaries and desires, throughout the interaction. Anything less than clear and enthusiastic consent is a signal to stop and reassess.
Now, beyond the initial stages of attraction and intimacy, this source also offers advice on dealing with specific, sexual challenges, like premature ejaculation and erectile dysfunction. And it suggests techniques like using thicker condoms, applying numbing creams, trying herbal supplements, even like trying to distract yourself mentally during sex by, thinking about non-sexual things. What are your thoughts on these approaches?
Well, while some of these techniques might offer temporary solutions or, physical workarounds, it's important to acknowledge that these issues often have underlying psychological and emotional components. Things like anxiety, stress, relationship dynamics, and body image can all play a significant role.
So you're saying it's not just about finding the right physical fix.
Exactly. Sometimes the most effective approach involves addressing those root causes of these issues. And that often requires looking beyond the, purely physical. Talking to a therapist or counselor who specializes in sexual health can be incredibly beneficial for individuals and couples facing these challenges.
It strikes me that this source puts the responsibility of fixing these issues solely on the man, which might not be the most helpful or realistic perspective.
I agree. It's important to remember that intimacy is a shared experience.
Yeah.
If a couple is facing these types of challenges, approaching them as a team with open communication and mutual support, I think that can lead to much more positive outcomes.
Yeah. And this goes back to the importance of, not relying solely on those predefined signals that this source emphasizes. If a man is overly focused on interpreting every gesture and nuance, he might miss crucial cues about his partner's comfort level or genuine desires. What happens if he misreads a friendly gesture as something more and continues to escalate the interaction despite clear signs of discomfort?
Yeah, that's exactly why relying on assumptions and trying to decode these so-called signals can be so problematic. Direct, honest communication is far more effective and respectful.
Right.
If there's any doubt, ask. There's nothing less attractive than someone who barrels ahead without considering their partner's feelings or being attuned to their verbal and nonverbal cues.
The source also suggests that there's a power shift after sex.
Yeah.
Like implying that men automatically gain more power in the relationship once intimacy has occurred. Is that always the case, or is this another example of oversimplification?
Not necessarily. While some relationships might experience a shift in dynamics after becoming sexually intimate, it's crucial to remember that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, trust, and equality, regardless of sexual history. This idea of a power shift after sex, I think it perpetuates a lot of outdated and potentially harmful gender stereotypes.
It seems like overall, this source is presenting a very specific, perhaps even outdated, view of dating and relationships, one that might not resonate with everyone or reflect the diverse ways people experience attraction and intimacy.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. I mean, some of the concepts in this source, they might resonate with some people, but it's important to approach this type of advice, with a critical eye and a discerning one, too. It's essential to kind of filter the information through your own values and experiences rather than just blindly adopting someone else's framework for, how relationships should work.
It's almost like he's trying to create this playbook for dating and attraction, reducing these complex human interactions to this set of rules and signals.
Yeah.
But relationships, there's so much more nuance than that, right?
Absolutely. Human connection, it's not a game, right? There's not a predetermined set of winners and losers. Reducing it to like this formulaic approach, I think it ignores the emotional depth, the individual nuances, the genuine vulnerability. That's what makes relationships meaningful and rewarding.
Yeah. I also sense this pressure on men to perform a certain type of masculinity to be successful in dating. Like they need to be dominant, assertive, always in control. Does that create unrealistic expectations and, I don't know, maybe even limit genuine connection?
There's definitely an element of that in this source. It perpetuates, a lot of outdated stereotypes about male and female roles, which can be limiting and even harmful to everyone involved.
So what's the takeaway here for our listeners who are, navigating the dating world, which can be confusing and ever-evolving, right? What can they glean from this deep dive that will actually help them build healthier, more fulfilling connections?
I think the most important takeaway is authenticity. Be yourself. Communicate openly and honestly. Respect your own boundaries and those of others. Trying to fit into someone else's mold of what's attractive or desirable, ultimately, that's a recipe for unhappiness and inauthentic connections.
That is such a good point. It's so easy to get caught up in trying to follow the rules or, play the games. But what truly matters, it's connecting with someone on a genuine level, where you can be your true self without pretense or performance.
Exactly. And that can only happen when you're being true to yourself and allowing your partner to do the same. Vulnerability, authenticity, and open communication, those are the foundations of any lasting, fulfilling relationship.
And we can't forget consent, right? Enthusiastic, ongoing consent that's non-negotiable in any healthy sexual interaction. No means no. And anything less than a clear and enthusiastic yes is a no.
Totally agree. Prioritizing clear communication and mutual respect, that's essential. That's what creates a safe, enjoyable, and truly intimate space for exploration and connection.
So while this source, it might have some thought-provoking points, it's crucial to take its advice with maybe a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And always filter it through your own values and experiences, right? Yeah. What might work for one person or one relationship won't necessarily apply universally.
Exactly. And never hesitate to seek out additional perspectives and resources. There's a wealth of information out there on healthy relationships, communication, sexuality, consent. Don't be afraid to learn, grow, and challenge any advice that doesn't align with, your values or your vision for a healthy and fulfilling relationship.
This has been quite a deep dive. We covered a lot of ground, from physical touch and body language to consent, power dynamics, the complexities of sexual intimacy. What's your final thought for our listeners today? Something they can carry with them as they, navigate their own relationships.
My final thought is this. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't be afraid to speak up, set boundaries, and prioritize your own well-being. Healthy relationships, they're built on a foundation of mutual respect, clear communication, and shared values. Don't settle for anything less.
That's great advice. And if you find yourself questioning the rules of dating, that's a good sign. It means you're thinking critically and prioritizing your own needs and values.
Thanks for tuning in to Sam's Summaries. If you found this episode useful, let us know with a like, follow, and share. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to visit samfury.com to get free access to all of Sam's original summaries, which you can download as PDFs, as well as other exclusive content. It's all completely free at samfury.com.